It is one of the most important occasions in India's long and troubled journey with defense production. Prime Minister Narendra Modi today flagged off and inaugurated what is essentially the Indian private sector's first ever manufacturing facility for military aircraft. That's right. This picture here may be just one picture in one frame, but the Prime Minister of India, along with his Spanish counterpart, has basically lifted the veil of a facility that goes down in history as breaking the monopoly of India's state-owned institutions like HAL and the defense public sector undertakings. And for the first time, the private sector, which has been yearning for a chance to build weapons, aircraft and hardware for the Indian military, has finally got that chance. Take a look at this report of the big milestone inauguration of the Indian C295 factory. A milestone for Make in India in defense and aerospace. A flagship beacon for the future of defense production in India. And the country's first private sector facility building aircraft for the military. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his visiting Spanish counterpart presided over the inauguration of the final assembly line of the Made in India Airbus C295 military transport aircraft, a joint venture between Tata and the European aerospace giant. Under this contract, while Airbus will deliver 16 fully built aircraft from its Spanish facility, the remaining 40 will be built here in Vadodara, with full aircraft rolling out of this line inaugurated by the leaders of the two countries.
हम भारत और स्पेन की पार्टनरशिप को नई दिशा दे रहे हैं. हम C295 ट्रांसपोर्ट एयरक्राफ्ट के प्रोडक्शन की फैक्ट्री का शुभारंभ कर रहे हैं. आज अक्टूबर महीने में ही ये फैक्ट्री अब एयरक्राफ्ट के प्रोडक्शन के लिए तैयार है.
In 2026, the first C295 manufactured in India will produce by this plant in Vadodara. This aircraft, it is a symbol of the Spanish and European aeronautical industry. In addition to contributing to modernizing India's defense capabilities, it will also drive technological development, particularly for the state of Gujarat, India's leading manufacturing hub.
Providing a major boost to Atmanirbhar Bharat, the inauguration comes 3 years after the Indian Air Force signed up for the C295 to replace legacy British Avro transport aircraft in service.
Inaugural landing of the Indian Air Force aircraft C295.
Of the 16 to be delivered from Spain, 6 have already been delivered to the Indian Air Force. A C295 recently made a debut landing in public at the new airport in Navi Mumbai as well. In service with 36 countries and their militaries, the C295 is a versatile tactical transport aircraft capable of rapid operations and can carry 73 fully armed troops of 48 Special Forces paratroopers. It can be converted for all manner of operations, including medical evacuation, humanitarian relief operations, surveillance missions, and even low-altitude delivery in hostile airspace. The inauguration in Vadodara comes days after the demise of Ratan Tata, under whose leadership the Tata Group's foray into defense took place.
It is a historic moment not only for the Tata Group, but also for India, and this project embraces the true Atmanirbhar vision of our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji. Made in India aircraft, where the aircraft parts manufacturing as well as the full assembly of the aircraft and the integration is being done for the first time in India by private sector.
The Make in India C295 program has become an industrial benchmark, which is aligned to the Prime Minister Modi's vision of self-reliance or Atma Nirbharat Bharat. With the C295 program, not only Tata and Airbus will assemble 40 aircraft here in this state-of-the-art final assembly in Vadodara, but we will also manufacture all sections and 13,000 of the total of 14,000 detailed parts of the aircraft here in India.
The first Made in India C295 will roll out of the Vadodara facility in September 2026, and production here will ramp up to deliver 40 aircraft to the Indian Air Force by August 2031. India has become the largest customer for the C295 with the acquisition of 56 aircraft in total. The C295 Make in India program will produce more than 85% structural and final assembly of 40 aircraft, along with the manufacturing of 13,000 detailed parts in India, for which 21 special processes have been certified and 37 India-based suppliers, both from the private and public sectors, have been enlisted. This means a huge number of aerospace manufacturing jobs and high skill set employment. Beyond the 56 aircraft for the Indian Air Force, the facility is certain to receive orders from the Indian Navy and internal security agencies, in addition to civil aviation carriers. With Brajesh Doshi in Vadodara, Gujarat, Bureau Report, India Today. And a little over a year ago, in fact, in July 2023, I happened to be in Spain, where the first 16 of these aircraft are being built by Airbus at its own facility in Spain and delivering them to the Indian Air Force. 6 of those aircraft have already been delivered. Another 10 will be coming, and the remaining 40 will be built at this facility that's been opened today by Prime Minister Modi. Take a look at this ground report where I got up close with the first C295 for the Indian Air Force. This is July last year. We're here in Sevilla in Spain at an Airbus assembly facility to see something that Indian journalists are seeing for the first time. That is the first C295 aircraft for the Indian Air Force. This aircraft is the first one that's been built by Airbus, a part of 16 such aircraft that are going to be built at this sprawling facility and delivered very soon. This particular aircraft is going to be delivered in just the next few weeks to the Indian Air Force, after which 15 more such aircraft will be built at this precise facility in Sevilla in Spain for delivery to the Indian Air Force. So I'm walking around the aircraft. It's a first look at C295 number 1 for the Indian Air Force. It's going to be fulfilling a long-standing need that's been felt by the Indian Air Force for over a decade. It was a requirement to replace the old vintage British HS-748 Avro aircraft. I'm walking around the first C295 now under the tail area of this aircraft. The important thing about the C295, remember, isn't the fact that the first 16 are going to be built here in Spain. And here on India Today, we've gotten first access to the aircraft, also because something very important is taking place back in India. 16 of these aircraft are going to be built here in Spain, but the other 40, as many of you will know if you've been watching India Today and my show, is that the other 40 are going to be built in Vadodara at a Tata facility. These aircraft will have their technology transferred by Airbus to their partner Tata, and then Tata becomes the first Indian private sector company to build military aircraft for the Indian Armed Forces. The Indian Air Force operates aircraft like the AN-32. The Avros, of course, are being phased out, but these aircraft are going to be fulfilling an extremely crucial need. Remember, the Air Force operates aircraft for many different things, but its transport aircraft are crucial because India is geographically large. We've got all kinds of terrain. This particular aircraft is capable of landing on unprepared surfaces. It's designed for operations of high altitude areas, which is a particularly difficult thing, in aviation because of the thin atmosphere and the various other challenges. And remember, India has important, crucial air bases at high altitude, whether it is Leh, whether it is Thois, the world's highest military airfield which is Daulat Beg Oldi, is also in India, and the aircraft of this kind has been proven to be able to operate from such forbidding locations. Now, 56 aircraft of this kind will be built for the Indian Air Force. That number might go up because the Indian Air Force, apart from replacing its old Avros, also has to replace over 100 AN-32 aircraft. And AN-32s, remember, are of Ukrainian origin. Great aircraft, they're workhorses of the Indian Air Force, but they are also aging and will need to be replaced by new generation transport aircraft of the kind that the C295 is. Whether or not that happens remains to be seen, but with an Indian factory churning out these aircraft between now and 2031, it stands to reason that this very same aircraft should actually replace the AN-32. Apart from the Indian Air Force's own requirement, this is a very versatile aircraft in the sense it's not just a transport aircraft. Look at it as a bit of a Swiss Army knife. It depends on what you put into it. You can sling on a maritime radar, it becomes a maritime patrol aircraft. Very much like what the Indian Navy and the Indian Coast Guard are looking at. About 15 aircraft in total is what they're looking at. It can be used for land surveillance if you put on the right kind of sensor. The Border Security Force is looking for that kind of capability. If you add passenger seats, you can convert it into a short-haul regional airliner. India needs many hundreds of those kind of things. If you add anti-submarine sensors and a torpedo capability, it can become an anti-submarine aircraft. If you put a radar on its back, it can become an airborne early warning platform. So what I mean is it's very modular. It depends on what you want to do with the aircraft, and it can be used for all these different kinds of purposes. So if you have a production line for the C295 in India, it becomes something very useful for India's different and very disparate needs across different terrains. So it's historic in all kinds of ways because the C295 not only fulfills all these needs, but gives India an aircraft manufacturing capability in the private sector which has never been there before. Airbus has had a long relationship with India, but this is for the first time that such an ambitious and landmark project is being executed. 56 of these aircraft being built 100%, almost 100% in India by the end of the entire program. In Sevilla, Spain, this is Shiv Arur for India Today. So 6 aircraft have already been delivered. The first India-made aircraft, the first India-made C295 will be delivered to the Indian Air Force sometime in 2026. 40 of them will be built between 2026 and 2031. It's going to be a facility that builds a huge number of aircraft. But where does the C295 actually fit into the Indian Air Force's transport aircraft fleet? Let's tell you first what the Indian Air Force operates from low to high. Let's see. Dornier is a very famous German aircraft, small transport aircraft, has been licensed built by Hindustan Aeronautics Limited for many years. The Indian Air Force currently operates about 58 of these little aircraft that conduct all manner of missions. Then you've got the Avro HS-748. These are vintage British aircraft, and these are the ones that are now being replaced by the Airbus C295. These are British aircraft, also licensed built since the 70s by HAL. 57 of them are being replaced right now by the C295. The aircraft that the Indian Air Force operates in larger numbers than any other in the transport sphere is the Ukrainian AN-32. It's a Soviet origin aircraft built in Ukraine, upgraded in Ukraine. It's a tactical airlifter. Over 100 of those currently in service. Many of them are of an improved, upgraded version. Just above that, you get the C295. That's where the C295 actually plugs in. It replaces the Avro and perhaps the AN-32 going forward. It's a Spanish aircraft. Airbus is a European conglomerate made in Spain, but also now, as we just showed you that last report, going to be made here in India. In service, there are 6, 50 more to be delivered for a total of 56, but there will be more, and I'll tell you in a moment. Next comes the C-130J Super Hercules. It's an iconic tactical air transporter built, and the origin is, of course, the United States of America. It's a medium airlifter. India currently has 12. The Indian Air Force operates 2 squadrons of these, one in Hindon on the outskirts of Delhi and the other in the eastern sector. Then you've got the Ilyushin IL-76, very recognizable by its silhouette It's also a Soviet origin behemoth. India currently operates about 17 of these heavy lift transport aircraft. And finally, the C-17 Globemaster III, which is the newest of the heavy lifts, also an American icon as far as wartime and combat airlift is concerned. It's a strategic airlifter. Now let me tell you about what the C295 is going to do in India. In the Indian Air Force, 56 of them will finally be inducted. The missions include airlift, logistics, troop transport, medevac, humanitarian relief, and surveillance, special operations using paratroopers, low altitude supply, that kind of thing. The Indian Navy has planned for 9 of these aircraft. That number might go up. The missions include maritime surveillance, medium-range maritime surveillance, anti-submarine warfare, and also anti-ship warfare because it can carry anti-ship missiles. The Indian Coast Guard has asked for something called a multi-mission maritime aircraft, or triple MA, 6 of those based on the C295, in which the planned missions will include, obviously, coastal surveillance, in addition to search and rescue, oil spill response, and possible other utilities. Above and beyond these tri-service uses by the Air Force, Navy, and the Air Force and Navy and Coast Guard, you've also got something called the DRDO Airbus C295 Airborne Early Warning Aircraft. An unspecified number of these are likely to be built, where you take the C295 aircraft, you sling on an India-built multi-mission radar on the back of it, like the Netra aircraft that you've already seen in service with India, and they become very, very capable airborne early warning and also command and control aircraft. Then you've got the Border Security Force and possibly even the Indian Army looking at unspecified numbers of these aircraft for land surveillance, troop and cargo transport, and any other missions. And last but not least, we have to remember that beyond the military, beyond the paramilitary, beyond the security agencies, there are civil operators. The C295 can just as easily, as I said in my ground report from Spain, be, the inside can be hollowed out and it can be converted into a passenger jet, a very comfortable passenger jet. And India needs short-haul aircraft for that next leap in aviation and connectivity in the country under the Udan scheme as well. And these aircraft could very easily be built in Vadodara and supplied to Indian civil carriers and civil operators for that kind of thing. So the C295 is going to be much bigger than just the 56 that are being built currently for the Indian Air Force. Very privileged to be joined now by former Chief of the Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal RKS Bhadoria, who's been instrumental in the Make in India thrust within the military for many years. He's someone who has, who has given a great deal of momentum and impetus to Made in India projects, including the C295. Air Chief Bhadoria, thank you very much for being with me. Thanks, sir. Your opening comments on this milestone occasion, the Prime Minister inaugurating the final assembly line of the C295 in India, sir.
C295 production facility set up by Tata and Airbus. This is the first military aircraft production being set up on the transport side, and I think it's a huge game changer as far as our industry is concerned, because as you're aware, HAL has been at the core of our development, ADA and HAL, in terms of fighters, in terms of helicopters, in terms of all the trainer aircraft so far. But on the military aircraft side and on the private sector involvement side, this is the first contract with the private sector and first on the transport aircraft side. So it's hugely important. And for the industry, for evolution of our aviation sector, this is, I think, a game changer.
Can you give us a sense, Air Chief, what the C295 can do better than what it will be replacing in the Indian Air Force and what the Air Force currently already operates? What will the Air Force be able to do now that it perhaps couldn't do before?
No, this was planned as Avro replacement. We had 56 Avros; those were to be replaced. As you are aware, Avros were inducted in 60s, so they were end of life. As a replacement for Avros, it is hugely capable. In fact, its capability goes much beyond what it is replacing, and in fact, it is capability-wise somewhere close to AN-32. So overall, as far as the roads are concerned, across the board, all transport aircraft roads, it will be able to undertake very effectively, be it transportation of troops, for moving load, for supplies in forward areas, for para drops, for supply drops, everything, all the roles, the ambulance role, uh, the communication role. Avro was being used hugely for that role. So overall, I think in terms of what it brings in terms of capability to the Indian Air Force is much beyond what it was replacing. So
Yeah.
it would be hugely beneficial for the Air Force operationally.
I'm sure, Air Chief, that the Indian Air Force prefers to operate India-built aircraft rather than, getting imported stuff because of the many complexities involved. But, I'm sure our viewers would like to hear that from you. Am I right that the Indian Air Force would much prefer to use and operate something that's made here in India?
Oh, that is absolutely a totally different ballgame. When we operate aircraft built in India, the entire maintenance chain becomes much easier. The kind of support that is available towards, let us say, spare supplies, towards support in terms of servicing, towards support in terms of major overhauls subsequently. And most importantly, when it is built in India, when you want to upgrade, when you want to add features, when you want to improve some aspects of its performance, in any form, be it in avionics upgrade, be it in some of the kind of loads that you want to carry, some of the roads that you want to bring in, it is hugely beneficial. And this is not even talking about the importance of it to the industry itself. For the industry, a huge project like this, when they come into the supply chain for Indian Air Force and for 295 for their global supply chain, that is very beneficial. So
Yeah.
overall, for the industry, it is extremely good. And for Indian Air Force, of course, it is hugely beneficial.
What about the spillover effects? Will Indian industry benefit from this? This is, after all, sir, an assembly facility, where lots of different parts will be put together here. Many of those parts are being manufactured, of course, in Telangana as well. But will there be some benefits for the industry in terms of know-how, not just how to build, but how to develop?
Yes, for that, I would say this is the first step wherein you set up a production facility like this. There are huge number of accessories and sub-assemblies that get manufactured. So the capability of the industry in terms of manufacturing sub-assemblies and doing the integration final assemblies and manufacturing many of the subsystems, that capability comes up. Uh, there is a knock-on effect on the design capability. There's a lot of knowledge that comes into the industry, but you're right. From D&D aspects, you have to go much beyond, and this forms the baseline capability to be able to do the next step of designing your own or upgrading this aircraft itself. For
Yeah,
example, I would
yeah.
expect Tata now to go into a joint kind of development work with the Airbus to get to the next generation or the next upgraded version of 295, which can handle, for example, more short field operations, a more powerful engine, more capable high altitude operations, something like close to N32. So
Yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
upgrade, Tata can become a joint development partner. Subsequently, what you are talking about, our ability to design a transport aircraft per se, this capability of the industry would form the basis on which that kind of design and development would take place. So for the industry and for our design and development, I think this is a very big first major step.
And it's also useful to remind ourselves and to tell our viewers, Air Chief, that this Vadodara facility where the C295 is being built now for the Air Force is the very first private sector facility in the country building military aircraft. It has never happened before. This is basically a facility that comes up in a country where Hindustan Aeronautics Limited has had virtually 100% monopoly on local manufacture and assembly of aircraft for the Indian Air Force. It has enjoyed, a complete domination of that particular market. And now, with this facility coming up and hopefully more, HAL has competition. How do you see that?
Very rightly so. And we have to realize when you want to grow in the aviation, field, private sector involvement and the involvement of startups, involvement of MSMEs is the key.
Yeah.
So you cannot depend only on HL and the DPSUs to grow to the next level that we want to go. It is true for all. In fact, even for fighters, for the next generation aircraft that we are looking at, the private sector involvement has to go up. Therefore, this is a very, very landmark event
Yes.
wherein a contract with the private sector is done with Tata's, and the production will take place entirely in private sector. Uh, if we have to look at efficiencies, cost reduction, increase of, let's say, production rate, uh, increased involvement of MSMEs and across the board private sector, the a very, very coordinated effort of DPSUs and private sector MSMEs, that is the key to our growth in the future. Therefore, this not only gives the options to the Air Force, for the industry, it is a very, very essential step. And I hope a similar kind of steps get taken into our other fields of production on the aviation
Yes.
side, be it fighters aircraft, be it helicopters, be it trainer aircraft. The involvement of private sector needs to go up, and I would in the form of, let's say, either SPV, for example, for AMCA, or a similar kind of arrangements that can be done along with private sectors.
Air Chief, could could a facility like this, the one that the Prime Minister has inaugurated, and you talked about how you hope to see Tata and Airbus now, work together, not just on the manufacture and assembly of the aircraft, but co-developed, conduct actual aerospace research and development for either an upgraded version of the C295 or maybe even some kind of a newer transport aircraft for the Indian Air Force going forward for its next generation of operations. That would mean India's appetite for aerospace scientists, engineers, very, very top level, high skill set jobs will be of a major premium in this country. Does this have the potential, I dare ask, to reverse in some manner the brain drain that this country has been experiencing for such a long time? Engineers, aerospace experts, scientists, etc., won't have to go abroad for those high-skill jobs. They can stay here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Not only reverse the brain drain, it gives very, very big challenges to our new generation that is coming up of engineers from IITs and all the engineering colleges to come into, the real high-end technology and design and development. Because it is challenges like this, when you have something new to design, something big to design, something big to deliver to the nation, to our defense services, those are the challenges that need to be thrown up to these youngsters who come into this field. This wasn't there earlier in this manner, especially in the D&D field and R&D field. And I think this landscape is changing. And this will be the biggest change that this private sector involvement will bring in. And that's why I'm repeating, I hope a similar kind of thing happens into other fields, wherein huge amount of private sector participation, increased participation of MSMEs and startups into our R&D and D&D setup, along with DPSUs and DRDO. We need to change this entire and that's how we will grow in this aviation field. It's very complex. And apart from looking at what we have achieved on the airframe and other sides, we need to look at the engines, which has been a sad story so far. And I think that's again an area where we need to look at private sector and public-private partnership maybe to succeed in that area.
Final question, Air Chief Vadodara, is, India has a vast market. We've just told our viewers about how beyond the 56 C295s that will be built, that will be delivered and built in India, there's going to be a much larger demand for these aircraft within the country from the other services, from the civil sector, etc. But beyond that, does this facility and facilities like this sort of plug India into a global aerospace supply chain? Because that's where the future really lies. India is already quite advanced in aerostructures, manufacturing subsystems and components for all the big aerospace companies in the world. But does a facility like this only address the Indian market, or does India gain the benefit from being part of a global supply chain? Because that's where we are competing with countries like China.
it is a big opportunity. When you start manufacturing aircraft like this, the effort must be to not only manufacture, for example, for our current order, it is 56 aircraft. But whatever manufacturing facility gets set up for sub-assemblies, for other components, etc., which are being made here, they must form a part of the supply chain of Airbus for the global supply chain. Also, it will be a stepping stone for the industry to grow as such, and all our future developments of aircraft requirement in this zone, in the 295 zone, or a little higher zone where this aircraft can be modified upwards, both in capability, in load, and in performance. That should happen within the country. So the supply chain and getting into global supply chain is the key. Unless the numbers increase for our industry, you cannot become very efficient and low cost.
True.
I think for the industry, this will be again a very major step to get into the global supply chain. Off and on for small components, our industry has been doing, for example, some doors and some other parts that our industry, private sector has been increasingly getting into the supply chain. But this changes the game. You are getting into a major way in the supply chain. And I think a similar effect we should try on the Airbus fleet, for example, on the 320s, 321. If you're ordering 1,200 aircraft, our industry must keep stepping up into the supply chain more and more. And that's how the industrial growth will take place in this sector. The sector is very complex. It is time consuming. It is very high investment. And the moment you have these export capabilities, I think that is the key.
Reverses the brain drain, more jobs, more for the economy, more for the military, more optimized hardware for the Indian Air Force, for defense needs. High-skilled jobs stay in the country, a bigger ecosystem as far as engineering jobs and aerospace jobs is concerned. It goes beyond just something that flies. It's something that has the potential to be a game changer for India in the field of self-reliance in defense and beyond in a globalized world. Air Chief Marshal R.K.S. Vadodara, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much for speaking to India today.